All right, Mr. Chaito.
Good evening, folks. I'm Glenn Chido, and with ICS, been with ICS for 12 years. I have my partner on the line as well. So, Lynn, you want to introduce yourself?
Yeah, good evening, everyone. Thanks for joining us. My name's Lynn Dyer. I've been with ICS 7 years.
So, what we're going to do here, folks, is we're going to go through a couple different assessments that Lynn and I were involved with. They were the listening sessions as well as the educational adequacy space analysis. And so, if you were part of at least the listening sessions, you'll know what we're talking about is for sure as we go through this. The screen that you see currently in front of you right now are the different groups and the dates, I should say, that we met with. So we met with several internal stakeholder groups as well as external groups. And so I'll give you a second there, but you can see the dates and times. Go ahead. These were the questions, and again, if this is old news to you, I apologize, but nonetheless, this is the questions that we asked every group. On the left-hand side, every group got those questions, great things, and what are the challenges, and the mission statement, and so on. On the right-hand side, though, you see a little bit of difference there in the sense that most of the groups we did ask them to give advice to the decision makers. The only group we didn't do that with is the school board. We just didn't ask them to give themselves advice, but we did ask them what their expectations were of this overall process, and they gave us some information. As far as the students, we asked them about the younger siblings. What would they want for the younger kids, brothers, sisters, or just younger kids in general that they didn't have come through the district? And the last one, all the external groups, we ask them what's the best way to communicate back to you, because there'll be a series of information not only now but after this as the process continues, and the school district obviously wants to have a handle on what's the best way to get all this out from a transparency perspective to the community. So what you see here, and the next few slides basically will be the same, but on the left-hand side, you see the internal themes. So all the internal groups, we bunched them together and made a summary of their respective responses. External, obviously, on the other side, all the outside groups. As you look at this, they are in a list of priorities. So for instance, and I'll read just a few, but as you look at this, dedicated caring staff relationships, we saw that statement or something very, very close to it 114 times through the internal groups. Next one there, CTE programs, health careers, ag, business, Fab Lab, 34 times, and so on and so forth on that side. On the other side, the external, committed teachers and staff to student excellence, 29 times, school board working together, communication, 20 times, and so on. I'll give you a second here to read the rest of them, but that's what the numbers mean related to the statement. Looking at the challenges, same scenario, same setup. Internal side, aging facilities and right sizing, 159 times. Lack of gym space, sports facilities, track needs, 23, and so on and so forth. On the external side, much of the same. You'll see a lot of commonalities as you look at this, but outdated aging facilities, 36 times. School funding, 28. Declining enrollment, 26. Again, I'll give you a couple of seconds here to just kind of read through the rest of them. I should note that there were many, many more statements other than what you're currently seeing on these slides, but we call them singlets. They just didn't really have that frequency component as the ones that we've showed you. On this one, this is the mission statement. You don't see numbers here, but largely because they were so specific in a lot of their comments. Once again, there were many more than what we currently have on the slide. But preparing children for a successful future on the internal side, I should say, educate now for jobs later, prepare to meet the challenges of life after high school. On the external side, innovative, adaptive, flexible educational plan for real life. Leaving with real life skills, not just academics. This was related to the mission statement question. Give you a second to read those through. This one here on the internal side, what would you want to be known for 20 years from now in terms of the district as well as, and we kind of tied the city into this piece as well. So we did get some comments that way. But looking at this, new elementary school on the internal side, new elementary school in 5 years, a new building full of lots of kids, increasing enrollment, families that are staying. On the external side, becoming a district where people want to move, offering online classes to be competitive, test scores that exceed the state average. And again, give you a second here just to read the rest of them. And I remind you, there were many more than this. We just couldn't get all of them on the slides. On the internal side, partner with the city and county to grow together. Focus on what can make Aitkin stand out from a surrounding area. Don't spend money on making quick fixes. This was the advice question. On the external side, transparency and open and honest communication. Be present to the community in the community to get the message out. Get feedback from the taxpayers. I'll give you a second to read these through, and this was the advice question. On the expectations, this came from the school board. Now, this was their exhausted list, not in any particular order as far as priority, but when we asked the school board to give us or tell us what their expectations were of the processes, number one up there, the first bullet, clear directions where ISD1 and Aitkin goes from here, that we will not put anything on a ballot if the board is not unanimous. Community engagement in this process to make sure that can get the community behind us. Tools to gain community support. And again, I'll give you a chance to go ahead and browse through the rest of those comments. And again, this was their exhausted list as far as expectations. Then we flipped over and we talked about it this happened to be with the students. We asked them, of course, what they would want or that type of thing for the younger siblings. And on the bottom of the screen, it might be a little bit hard for you to see, but at the bottom of the screen, you'll see some numbers. That's how many times we actually saw that particular statement. And so we graphed this for you folks. In this case, we have a couple slides here coming up that way. But as far as the kids were concerned, they want eighth hour to be involved throughout the year. Auditorium for musical and choir and AC. And you can see how it kind of slants back and starts coming back as far as frequency. Better locker rooms and athletic facilities, cardio room and the weight room. Better lunches with multiple options. A better track. Better bathrooms. And so on. And again, I'll give you a few seconds here to go ahead and read through the rest. Numbers at the bottom tell you the frequency or how many times we actually saw that. This was with the community groups, and you can see which groups right there, a little bit of an eye chart, but same format here with the graphs. As far as the best way to communicate, economic development, social media, they thought that might be the best. Texting, emails, website, and so on. If I go across over to the hospital board, email, they thought that would possibly be the best. And of course, they had some other comments there, in-person meetings and so forth. Again, the numbers you can see, in this case, the numbers are at the top. On the community Zoom one, they liked the fact that your superintendent called everybody and invited and shared this listening session opportunity. They thought that was a good idea, and that was kind of out there in front. I prefer email, but I think the majority of the community likes communication through Facebook. There again, it kind of scaled off a little bit, but I'll give you a second to read the rest. But these were comments from the external groups or community groups. In addition to that, we also met with the foster grand friends. Same question, communication piece, which the school district is very, very serious about and really wants to make sure they do this right because they want to be able to continue to disseminate information out to the community at large. But foster grand friends, newsletter, that happened to be their top idea or choice. Email was in there, social media, specific website, and so on. The hospital employees, social media, they thought was should be out there, and that was out in front. Follow up with listening sessions. They thought what we were doing would be a good idea to follow up with those. And then again, a few extra ones there. We had an open community meeting. Newspaper was their number one idea. School newsletters, public meetings, again, have a handful after that. And then the Lions, and we also had a Lions and another open community meeting, and Facebook was largely their thought. You'll see it in the numbers again, just to remind you of that. They're at the top. Email, local newspaper, and so on. So what I'm going to do now is I'm going to turn this back over to my partner, Mr. Dyer there, and he will walk you through the facility question. We did have one question that was specifically related to facilities, so I'll turn it over to him, and he will walk you through his part.
All right, thanks, Glenn. So the way we teed this question up, we asked each of the stakeholder groups to identify what they thought was the greatest facility and grounds need throughout the district. And we asked them to verbally tell us what their thought was. We took their thoughts, put it on a slide or on a chart, and then once we got our list compiled with each group, we used that question for a prioritization activity. So we asked people to make some choices. And what we tried to do was to stay consistently with about 60% of the list that we got. So if we got 10 items out of a group, we'd ask them to choose 6 of those 10 items for their prioritization activity. It didn't matter the ranking they gave us. We just wanted to know what 6 were the most important. So what you're going to see is the result of that question in the form of a chart. So we'll start out with your school board and your administrative team. Their list, their top priority for facility grounds and needs in your district was a new elementary at Rippleside, or for Rippleside. All facilities in one location, collaborative, flexible space in both buildings, updates to the athletic fields, safer pickup and drop-off area for students. And again, like Glenn did on the previous slides, I'll give you just a few minutes to scan through the rest of those. Numbers down at the bottom represent the frequency that we heard responses to this particular question. Moving on to your high school staff. Now, we call these the internal groups. So this would be anyone within the school district itself. Next was your high school staff. Their top priority, need more green space. HVAC updates at the high school, natural lighting at the high school for some of the classrooms. You got a lot of internal rooms there. More gym space district-wide, more multi-use space, bathroom updates at both buildings. And then again, you can see it, and this is their entire list that they prioritized. I'll let you scan through the rest of those items for the high school. Moving on to the elementary. This comes a little tougher to read. We had a lot of feedback from your elementary staff, a little bit larger group, but their top priority was updates to student bathrooms, and they've got some warm water, hot water issues at the elementary. That was their top priority. We heard that 29 times out of that group. Secure entrance at both buildings, roof repair for the elementary, aesthetic updates to the buildings, excuse me, less congestive entry, safer bus drop and parent drop area. And again, updates to the HVAC system at Rippleside. Again, I'll let you scan through all of the other items that they had listed. We met with your para group. Their top priority was HVAC updates at both schools, sidewalk repairs at the elementary, handicapped access, and updates to the playground equipment at the elementary, more bathrooms, and updated ones at Rippleside. Also locate the SPED department at the elementary, kind of a common area. It's somewhat scattered throughout the school. They'd like to see that SPED department a little more consolidated. We met with your administrative assistant team. Their top priority was secure entrance of both buildings, need for more gym space for activities, HVAC updates at both buildings, update to the bathrooms at Rippleside, and a better place to secure the documents. Down at the very bottom of this, you'll see there's the last item has no votes. That's because it became an item for the list, but when it came to prioritization, it ranked down at the bottom for that particular group. Your high school students, updates to the bathrooms, parking lot improvements, HVAC updates, more land around the school because they realize that you are landlocked and don't have green space, new water fountains, updates to the locker rooms, and again, a few other items down towards the bottom. Your transportation food service group, their top request is more buses for your transportation department, needing more equipment to repair and work on the mechanical kinds of things with your transportation department. Hot and cold water issues, they identified that as well at the high school and the elementary, and roof repairs at both buildings. Also update to the kitchen equipment and the storage for both of the schools. So then we take all of your internal facility needs ideas and we kind of totaled them up, and this is what we came up with. So your top item internally, we had HVAC updates at the high school. We heard that 88 times out of your groups, or we saw that 88 times. Bathroom updates, 82, improving security, 76, more green space at the high school, 61, some updates to the auditorium, 53, and so on. Again, I'll let you scan through and see the numbers that came up for these items. We did have other items, but the frequency just didn't come up as often, so it didn't make the chart. Then moving on to the external group, same question, same process. The Aitkin Development Group, their top priority was classrooms to be equipped to meet whatever the learner's needs are, regardless of what that may be. All buildings and fields located on the same footprint, a plan for LTFM for the district. That's a long-term facility maintenance plan. The need for more green space were their top items. The hospital board replaced the elementary school, indoor-outdoor sports facilities for multi-use activities. Might be things like a gym, a walking track. One footprint for the elementary and the high school, keeping up with maintenance issues. A couple of their top priorities. We had a virtual or a Zoom community meeting. The folks on that call, their top priority was repair the roofs in both buildings, HVAC updates at the high school, parking lot updates for the high school student lot, secured entries at both buildings, electrical updates at the elementary, more gym space district-wide. Your foster grandparent group, their first thought was a new elementary due to the high maintenance costs at the current. More parking at both schools, more indoor gym space for both schools that would also be open for community use, having all the athletic fields connected on the same school footprint. Hospital staff, one campus facility for all students to address the safety issues. A lot of concerns with the bus drop off and students crossing especially at the high school, crossing the highway. Roof repairs at the elementary school, and somebody must have some insight here because apparently there's some leaks in the nursing area. More classroom space at the elementary, again, more gym space district-wide. Your face-to-face community group, we had a pretty good turnout for that. Updated technology, CTE space for your wood shop, your welding class, some of the technical trades. CTE stands for career and technical education. Repair roofs at the elementary, HVAC updates at both schools, plumbing, electrical issues at the high school, general maintenance across the district. And finally, we had your Lions Club, and then we also opened that up to community as well. That group expanding the CTE and the trades areas, more gym space district-wide, facility K-12 all on one footprint, general maintenance in the buildings, improved security at both buildings, and then some parking issues at the high school. So then we take all of your external, and we rank those. The top facility grounds need that we heard from your external group was that LTFM plan for the district, planning for the future, having all buildings and fields in one location. We heard that 50 times. Lack of gym space district-wide 41, lack of parking 38. And then again, I'll give you a few minutes to scroll through and look at that list. And then we took the facility needs from the internal group and we laid those alongside the facility needs from the external. And we combined those numbers to give you an overall total of how many times we heard those items. So the blue arrows represent the frequency, and you'll see a number inside of that blue arrow that's the total of the internal external. So we heard HVAC updates. That was the number one facility request from both groups at 107. All facilities on one footprint, 95. Improving security, 88. Auditorium, we heard about 81 times. More gym space, we heard that 79. More green space, 72. The roof repairs, 56. Aesthetic updates, 56. Improving the track, 43. Developmental space, age-specific kinds of things, 39. And then community multi-use space, 32. On the left side, what we heard from the internal that we didn't hear from the external, bathroom updates. And that kind of makes sense because the internal folks know more about the bathrooms probably than the external would, but that we heard that 82 times from internal. Safer drop-off area 48, handicapped access everywhere, we heard that 40. On the external side, we heard but didn't hear so much from the internal was the LTFM plan 55 times, and then the lack of parking at the high school 38. Now I'm going to flip this back over to my partner, and I'm going to let him tell you a little bit about another assessment that we did called Educational Space Adequacy.
Thank you, Lynn. In addition to the previous assessment, and Lynn and I were involved in two of the five different assessments on the district. We also did, and as you can see in front of you right now, we did a educational space adequacy report. And what that basically means is that Lynn and I went through all of the spaces, looked at the grounds, the green space, athletic fields, etc. We took our notes. We walked through every one of those areas, and I'll speak mainly about the buildings, but we walked through every one of those areas. And what we did is that we took our notes. We took a lot of measurements. We looked at square footage. We looked at natural light within the scope of a room, counter space, how much storage they had. With the younger groups, the kindergarten, early childhood, were the items in the room mainly the counter space and that type of thing? Were they kid friendly? In other words, were they tall? Were they down where little kids or younger kids could handle that? What Minnesota Department of Ed has is they have guidelines, and many years ago, a couple of individuals within the ICS world put together an assessment tool, and we still use that exact same assessment tool. So we took 18 of those categories that Minnesota MDE, and I'll use that acronym, but MDE has guidelines for. I want to be clear, they're only guidelines. They are not policies and they are not mandates. But anytime a school district possibly does a remodel or they build that type of thing, Minnesota Department of Ed, MDE, is going to look at it and say, how close are you, or are you within the guidelines related to what has been developed or what they have put in writing down there. So we use 18 of those. You can see them on the screen right now. Number one up there, classroom size and suitability. We look at the cafeteria, security of the buildings, how the main offices function, science rooms, art rooms, music, staff collaboration places and where they may be able to eat their lunches, that type of thing. You have student commons. Do they have one? Do they not have one? On the other side, number 10 there, Fayed, we look at that, athletic fields, locker rooms. Site suitability, that's just basically your green space outside of the schools. Parking and bus drop-off, technology, library media centers, sped rooms, auditoriums, career and tech, and hallways, washrooms, all those types of items. Now, what we do is middle school and high school, all 18 of those areas, we are comparing notes, or we're taking our notes and comparing them to the guidelines. The only difference for elementary is number 17 there, career and tech. Obviously, we don't teach career and tech at that level, so that particular category is not assessed. The rest of it is all assessed. Here's an example of number one there, the classroom size and suitability. When we look at a room, general classroom purposes, or excuse me, general purpose classrooms, we look at 850 to 950 square feet. Those are your first grade, second grade, third grade, and on up to sixth grade and so on. In your high school, that would be your math classes, social, English, that type of classroom. Those are the rooms that we're looking at relative to that type of square footage. You can see there, kindergarten, we're looking at the 1,200 to 1,500. Early childhood, is it within the 1,000 square feet or more? We look at, as I already mentioned, storage, cabinetry, adequate number of outlets within the room. Does it have natural light, interactive whiteboards, furniture? Are nowadays in a lot of the classrooms, we have movable furniture and they rearrange it in different times throughout the course of the year. But this is an example of the notes that that we take and look at as we walk through the school. What we do then, after we've looked at those spaces and every other space, and I want to be clear, we're talking about all of them, be it kitchen, be it whatever, those types of things. We're not overlooking anything. We take that information, Lynn and I, and we sit down and we start comparing and making our notes relative to, again, comparing them to the MDE guidelines. Once we have that draft, then we sit down with the building administration and we kind of go through the whole thing. Now, Lynn and I have certainly been in the education field for a long, long time. And so not that we have all the answers or we've seen everything, but we've certainly been in enough buildings to have a pretty good feel for it. But one thing that we don't do, and typically we don't do, we're not in the building when the kids are there. And that can kind of skew things relative to how the kids flow and function within that. So we take the time to talk to administration and we will go through a draft and give them our feedback, and they again will give feedback back to us relative to what they think and how they think we've developed the report. So from there, and our report looks like this, folks. We have what we will do is for all of those different categories that I previously mentioned, we will assign a green color to the areas that either meet or exceed the MDE guidelines. We will assign a yellow, excuse me, we will assign a yellow to the areas that doesn't mean they're bad areas. It just means they didn't check all the boxes. We call it 1 foot in the boat and 1 foot out. And then we will assign a red to those areas that, quite honestly, just do not meet the existing guidelines for MDE. The one thing we want to be clear in this, and we've mentioned this in every session we've had, we are not assessing curriculum. We are not assessing scheduling. And I want to be clear as also, we are not indicating anything that you may see a red at or even a yellow. We're not suggesting that there's not quality education going on there. We're just looking at the box, the space. And that's the only thing that we will bring our report to, again, eliminating any ideas that we're in there analyzing how people teach and so on and so forth, which is not the case. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to handle the elementary part of this, and then Lynn will handle the high school part of it, and that's what kind of wrap up this report. Looking at your elementary school, up there, category number 1, the classroom size and suitability. Basically, in the elementary world, 75% of the rooms within that building are undersized or do not meet guidelines. The only rooms that do are the ECFE room. You've got some rooms in the 3rd grade area that happen to be within the guidelines, and you've got a couple of 6th grade rooms that happen to be within the guidelines. Otherwise, the rest of them, unfortunately, are all under the guideline requirements. In the kindergarten world, specifically, just to give you an idea, only one of the classrooms actually had a bathroom in it, and typically we see restrooms or bathrooms in most of the kindergarten rooms. So that was just one component of that. But category number 1, we gave it a red. Looking at category number 2, the cafeteria, kitchen, and serving area. What we look for there in the kitchen areas, we look for a kitchen as 1,000 to 1,500 square feet, serving area 600 to 800 square feet. In terms of the seating for the kids, because they are in that gym area, that actually is adequate. And so looking at this, one of the reasons you see a yellow is that, as I mentioned before, just didn't check all the boxes. But if we were just to rate the kitchen by itself, actually we would have given it a red. So it's undersized. The current kitchen is 760 square feet. It's got a couple of ovens and warmers and a stove and a couple of mixers. The serving area is about 200 square feet. So very much undersized relative to what the guidelines call for. Category number 3 there, although you get buzzed in when you come into the building, and anybody that certainly has been in the elementary school, once you get through that first door, you literally can go just about any place you want. Now, granted, the office is right there, but you have free reign to go any direction you want. So we typically, and when we walk into it, and so many schools have made these adjustments up to this point, a lot of buildings that are older just haven't made that yet. But nonetheless, what we look for is you walk into a vestibule, you get buzzed in, then you walk into the office. So you go into a side door and you're already into the office and cleared there before you're allowed to be able to get into the rest of the building. Thus is why we gave that a red. That setup just doesn't happen to exist at your current elementary school. Unlike your high school, and for those of you that have been in the high school, and Lynn will talk to that, but you know what I'm talking. You've seen that particular piece. As far as the main office area, we look for a reception area of 250 to 400 square feet. Mail room 300 to 400. The nurses area, and this is where this one kind of fell short for the most part. A nurse area of 400 to 600 square feet. Conference area. Some storage areas, again, in that 150, 250 square feet, and the principal's office, 150. As far as your main office there now, it does fall. It is slightly in the range of the square footage, but it's a very busy area, and there's not much room for anybody. If there was a parent that was coming in, there's really no room for them to sit down and that type of thing. As far as the nurse's offices, and this again is where it really fell short. The nurse's office currently is about 250 square feet. It does have 3 little sick bays. It does have an outside entrance. But it falls short relative to the overall space with it. Your health office is 135 square feet. Counseling office, 147 square feet. So again, very, very low relative to the guidelines. Thus is where the red came. Category 5, 6, and 7. I won't go through all the dimensions of everything, but they were all green. They were all nice spaces. They're all within the guidelines, and thus is where the green came. As far as the staff room, staff area, what we look for there is a space that's very comparable to the classrooms as far as adequacy in the square footage area. But we look for a collaborative area of 150 to 200 square feet, workspace of 300 to 400, and the lounge area 300 to 400 areas, meaning where they eat. Your current space, although it does fall relative to the overall square footage of 500, where it was lacking is that there was really no breakout space for staff to do any collaborative work, whether it's curriculum work or having a small group meeting, that type of thing. Bathrooms were not located very closely to that area. Thus is why it got a yellow. It met requirements within the square footage, but it just lacks some of the other components. Student Commons area, number 9 there, we gave it a green. We understand that they use the media center. I mean, kids can, for the most part, hang out there in the media center as well as the STEM room. Number 10 there, Phy-Ed, athletics, and locker rooms. That particular area, what we're looking for is a gym space of 6,000 to 8,000 square feet. Usually we look for a divider curtain so they can have multiple stations going on at the same time. Washroom, shower, office space, and storage. Currently, your main gym is 3,200 square feet. It does have 6 stations, but there's no seating or no divider. The other part of that is there's no locker room. Basically, that's used for storage. And then you have we call it an auxiliary gym that's 3,100 square feet. Once again, it lacks a lot of the storage area and so forth. Thus is where the red came for that particular category. Number 11, there's site suitability, fields in the green space and storage. Actually, you got quite a bit of green space there at the elementary school. The kickback on that is we actually heard from staff that the playground equipment lacked the handicap accessibility, or the apparatuses were not handicap accessible. So that's where the yellow came there. I mean, the staff was very noticeable in their comments relative to lacking of that in that particular nice green space and a lot of the other components, but it still was lacking some things that were needed. So that's where the yellow came. Number 12 there, parking, bus drop off, staff and student parents. For those of you again who have been at the elementary, you park on the north side of the road there, and then behind that, which would be very close to that parking lot, is where people would drop cars would drop off their kids. Here's where the problem came, and this is why it became a yellow, or excuse me, a red. We look for a much more separation of that. And largely because, again, across the street and talking to folks, administration and so forth, a lot of people just even right across the street from the buses will drop their kids off or pick their kids up. That's a huge safety factor, kids running in between buses and so forth and so on. So typically we look for that separation. In your case, or in that case there at the elementary, just didn't have it. So that's where the red came. If you look at number 13, 14, 15, all again greens. All nice space or technology or one-to-one there. And COVID certainly brought a lot of schools to that situation. SPED areas and the library media center, nice spaces, large enough, and so forth. So that's where the greens came there. 16 and 17, typically in an elementary school, they don't have an auditorium. And in your case, that's no different. So we didn't have anything to evaluate there. I know you use gyms, but that's where you see the NAs. And then I mentioned earlier already, the career and tech is not in the elementary school. That's where the NA came there. As far as hallways, lockers, and washrooms, some of the hallways certainly were adequate in terms of square footage. We look for 10 to 12 feet as far as the hallway width, lockers 12 by 12 or 15 by 15. Truth be told, I think in today's market, so to speak, with kids, especially in the elementary world, with kids with book bags and boots and snow pants and so on and so forth, I'm not sure that the 15 by 15 even works much anymore. But nonetheless, that would be adequate. You do have some hallways, though, that were within that 10 to 12 foot range, and most of your lockers were all 12 by 12. If you go over by the main office, though, you got a 7-foot hallway there, and you lack some other spaces relative to the hallways. The biggest drawback of this one was you have several bathrooms that are not handicap accessible. They may have a sign there, but unfortunately they are not. So this, again, because of it partially does fit the guidelines, partially doesn't fit the guidelines. That's where we went with the yellow on this particular one. So what I'll do is I'll turn this back over to Mr. Dyer, and he'll walk you through the high school.
All right. Thanks, Glenn. All right. So same kind of format. We'll walk through each of the 18 categories. We'll spend most of our time on the reds and the yellows. But starting out with category number 1, classroom size and suitability. So in your high school, there are 20 general ed classrooms. Of those 20, 17 of them fall below the guidelines. So again, we're looking for 850 to 950 square feet. Of the 17 that fall under, 12 of those classroom spaces have no natural light. And so a lot of interior classrooms, and natural light becomes a real big thing that we look for in today's education. You do have 3 classrooms that are over that 850 to 950 guideline threshold. You have an English class, a social studies class. Actually, the largest one in your school building is your Spanish classroom. It's about 1,200 square feet. So overall, most of your classrooms also lack counter space and storage. So for that reason, category 1 became a red. Category 2, your cafeteria kitchen, kind of a similar situation as your elementary. The seating space for your cafeteria area is about 3,400 square feet, which is adequate for a school your size. But the biggest area of concern there is your kitchen. Kitchen is very undersized, with your serving area only about 305 square feet. You've got a food prep area about 500 square feet. We're looking typically for a serving area of 750 to 1,000, and that kitchen area being in that 1,200 square foot area. So if we were just to evaluate the kitchen, we would give that a red. The cafeteria space would be a green. This is why the yellow for overall for that category. Categories 3, 4, 5, and 6, all some really nice spaces. All of those check the guidelines. Some of those updates were done the last time there was some remodeling done at the high school, and brought those all into suggested guideline areas. So those are all green. Looking at your music classrooms, when we look at a choir room, Typically, we're looking for a space of 1,500 to 2,200. Instrumental, we look for about 2,000 to 3,000. Both of your music spaces are slightly undersized. Choir's about 1,500. Your band room is about 1,650. Biggest concern there, in addition to being a little undersized, would be the ceiling heights. 12, 13-foot ceilings in those spaces. Usually in a music facility, we're looking for 16 to 20 or even 18 to 20 for ceiling height. So thus became the yellow. Category 8, your staff lounge collaborative planning area. Kind of unique in your school because we look for a collaboration of 150 to 200 workspace, 3 to 400, eating space, 3 to 400. But you have 3 different spaces identified because each floor has its own staff work area. Your main floor is about 410. You've got a second floor area of about 400. And then your third floor is a little smaller, 270. But all of those spaces give adequate space for staff to gather for lunch. There really isn't necessarily a collaboration space, although they could use a general conference area for that. We also look for adjacent bathrooms. So because of your situation, it kind of checks some of the boxes, doesn't check all of them. We decided that yellow would be an appropriate category color for that. Student commons breakout area, you've got a number of spaces that students can gather in small group or collaboration spaces. One of them being that large space outside of your newer gym. Also, you've got some media center space that could be used. There's a little space outside of the media center as well. So we felt that that was adequate, and thus the green. Looking at your physical education, athletics, and your locker rooms. What we're looking for at a high school is generally 12,000 to 14,000 square feet, 2 to 3 for a middle school, high school. We generally will see 3 stations or work areas. When we look at your gyms, your Bailey gym is 5,400 square feet. You've got a locker room down below that that's about 600 square feet. And a non-functioning restroom, looks like an official's room may be used down there as well. And obviously a lack of storage for equipment in that space. Your new gym, about 9,500 square feet, it has some pull-out bleachers, but you don't have any divider in either of those gyms. So thus you're looking at really just 2 workspaces. If we were just going to evaluate the gyms by themselves, we would give those a red because there is a lack of gym space for a district your size. When we look at your locker rooms for your men's and your women's, you got some nice locker room spaces. They're both over 1,600 square feet. They do have non-handicap restroom facilities. The other thing we look for in locker rooms today are privacy showers, and those are lacking that as well. You do have a weight room that falls within guidelines. It's about 2,200 square feet, plus a machine weight room in the basement of your older gym, the bottom level of your older gym, about 1,700 square feet. Those would fall within guidelines as well. So overall, as a category, we felt that yellow was probably an appropriate color for that. Category 11, site suitability, green space, your fields, those kinds of things. Mainly because you're landlocked, you don't have any space around the high school. That was a red. Your athletic fields, located is separate from the high school. Your football field, you have tennis courts that were recently redone. Your baseball, softball complex area. You have a track out there. The track is in need of repair. We heard that multiple times. So overall, as a category for site suitability, the green space itself and the fields, overall for a category, we gave that a red. Parking bus drop off, again, that category was a red. Some real safety concerns with not having separated areas, but also with drop off being on the main highway there with crossing Highway 210. Some real concerns for student safety there. So for that reason, that became a red. Categories 13, 14, 15, 16, and 17, all of those categories fell within guidelines. Now, just a couple comments on those. Category number 15, your special ed, we identified about 12 different special ed spaces within your school. So that definitely checked the box there. You might scratch your head a little bit on category 16, your auditorium performing arts area. We know that auditorium updates was fairly high in the facility needs area, but what we try to do is consistently stay with identifying the box. And when we look at your auditorium, you have about a 5,500 square foot auditorium, a little over 2,000 square foot stage, a rear storage area. It's about 1,500 square feet with an exterior entrance to it. And when we look at all of that combined, that all falls within guidelines. Now, does the auditorium need updates? Probably does, but that's not part of our assessment. We don't assess the lighting and the curtains and the sound and those kinds of things. We identify just the box itself. On your career and tech area, those areas, again, you have some really nice spaces. The Fab Lab is about 1,900. You've got a metal shop that's almost 2,500, mechanics room that's 1,760. You've got a woods area of 2,900, another woods room that's 2,500, a fax room that's 1,000, your sewing area, a little over 1,000, your homemaking area. Again, going along with that, the one space in that career and tech area would be your ag room. That was the only one that fell short. That's very small at about 650 square feet. Business classroom, about 1,300 square feet. So all of those other spaces, very nice spaces. So that's why that got a green. And finally, your hallways, lockers, washroom area, category number 18. At your high school, that is a red. You have basically the main corridor hallways on the lower level all fall within guidelines. You've got some 12-foot hallways. You've got some 8-foot hallways with 12 by 12 lockers. Those lockers might be a little bit undersized for what students would need today. But upstairs in your academic corridors on the second and third floor, those are very small interior hallways. Some of them are 7 feet, others 8 feet, so very tight up there. But the other issue in your high school are your washrooms. Really, there's only a couple of handicapped accessible washrooms in your school. And so for that reason, that category became a red. So then what we do is we put your two schools side by side to identify the colors. And here's the results of the adequacy, the space adequacy assessment that we did. You'll see some commonalities with some of the categories being red. You'll see some commonalities with some of them being green, and then vice versa with your yellow. So one of the things we find is that a lot of the data we give when we give these reports back to the school board and community is people may forget a lot of the statistics, but sometimes the colors from this evaluation resonates with people. And what it does is it helps give your school board and your administrative team, if they're looking at planning to make any kinds of improvements or updates, it kind of gives them a starting point. You know, looking at this, what are some things that we can do that will maybe take that red category and move it up to a yellow, or possibly move it up to a green. So at least it kind of gives them a place to start and a format to look at to help make improvements in your district. So I'm going to turn this back over to my partner, Mr. Chido, and I'll let him do any final wrap up before we conclude here tonight.
Well, thank you. Thanks, Lynn, and thanks to anybody that's had an opportunity they couldn't make it to the meeting, but had the opportunity to take a look at this, or at least hear this recording. There are several different assessments. I talked a little bit about that at the beginning. These were only 2 of them. And there's assessments that have been done by the company about demographics. In other words, how many students do you have? There was assessments that were done or assessment done by an individual that looked at the roofs and the tuck pointing and the HVAC, that kind of thing. So there's a lot of information that has been gathered up to this point. When we did our face-to-face here not too long ago or just recently, we did have somebody ask the question, now what? Or where do you go from here? Basically now from here, and the district has all the information. Literally now the work starts, for lack of better terms. They will start to analyze all of this information and somehow come to some kind of a collaboration or consider a consolidation in a sense of their own minds. This is what we want to do or what we'd like to do. And then from there, and we help facilitate, not Lynn and I, but there are people that are going to be helping them facilitate that process. Then they start to look at schematics and they look at drawings and so forth and so on based on what they think and where they want to be. All along, though, and I go back to that one question about communication, especially to the exterior or the exterior folks, the transparency part, all along through that process, not every week, but all along there is dissemination about and information going back out to the public. So the public is kept in the loop as these steps occur and as they start to try to finalize whatever that plan is. Now that takes a while. That's not done in a week. But nonetheless, that's what they'll do from here. And then at some point, they will try to hone this down to this is what we want to do moving forward. And then the obvious thing, folks, is in with this, I think it's obvious, and I think to most folks, of course, what's the cost? And then how are we going to work this? Are we looking at this from a referendum? Are we have other funding sources and so on and so forth? That's all down the road. But nonetheless, that's the process. That's the end process when they figure that out. So with that, we would typically ask if you have any questions, but if you're listening to this as a recording, you may not. But if you do, honestly, get a hold of the superintendent. And if he can't answer it, he will get either back to us or he will get back to somebody within the ICS world and get you that answer. So again, we appreciate the fact if you've taken time to go through this. We hope it was easy and simple to follow and listen. But by all means, if anything comes up, please reach out to Dan, and we'll look forward to hopefully good things happening in Aitkin. Thank you.
Thanks, folks. Good night.